Hi, my name is Jay Shea Stanley. I am currently a professor of graphic design at a small college in western Kentucky. I've got a 30-year career in graphic design, illustration, the software development industry, publishing, the fashion industry, and higher education. But the goal was always to be an animator and work in the film industry. For whatever reason, that didn't happen until now. I'm currently sitting in my house in western Kentucky, surrounded by snow covered cornfields, working on the pilot episode of my original animated series, Grace Valor, for Jonathan Younger and his team at Arcana Studios. How I got to this point is a wild story, but what I thought I would do is document the making of this pilot. I've got an MFA in animation, but I've never gone into production on anything of this scope. I've done some small little short thesis film stuff, things like that, and all traditional. But with the Arcana Labs platform, it's changed the way I can realize this vision. And so everything I'm working on is Gen AI basically, but it's approached from the point of the artist and the designer. Okay, it's art-driven AI or artist-driven AI. So using my own original assets, my own original artwork story, that's the way I'm creating this series. So I thought maybe this would be helpful if anybody stumbled upon this who wanted to try to do the same thing. So a little bit about Grace Valor. Grace Valor is a series about a young girl and her dog who have to travel through space to try to find her lost family and be reunited. It's fun, silly, little hopeful show, and it rests on the shoulders of this plucky little girl. The idea for the show came about when I was working on my MFA in animation, had to develop a number of different series, and I wanted to do a show based around this little girl and her dog. I knew it was going to be a space fantasy kind of thing, just adventure and silly and fun. So that's the direction I decided on. This is the very first sketch of the character and her dog. Very kind of 2D, angular, really simple, nothing terribly complex about it, but it captures the attitude pretty well. And then I did some more sketching, and there's Grace and her dog Jonas, and these are all rough sketches. And I've got lots of sketches and work on this, but just to move this along. So again, you start with the sketches, and then this was one of the first kind of color sketches that I put together, a little more finished. It's still not real tight, but that is the original concept drawing of the two together. Kind of solid painting, but there's the black and white sketch, and then the individual sketch there. Then this is a sketch of her spaceship and some different environment design, concept designs. And this is a finished illustration, just like a promotional card for the project. Her character design changed a little bit. It's a little more fleshed out. It's got kind of a retro 60s, mid-century modern vibe to it. So, I did a lot of writing for it, some storylines, a lot of just the conceptual stuff. I didn't get into a whole lot of animation. I approached animation in college more from the perspective of the visual design of it, less the actual animation. I did some 3D models and some short little 3D sequences and some hand-drawn stuff for this. But once I got out of school, it never went beyond that. Life had other things that I needed to take care of, and so that kind of put this on the back burner or shelved it. And then back in July of 2025, I was playing around trying to figure out a way to incorporate AI into my curriculum for my students. Young artists are going to have to embrace AI if they want to stay employed. I know there's the fear that AI is going to take a lot of jobs, but the truth is talented artists who have a good sense of visual language, who are good at editing and self-editing, who have a sense of who they are as designers, can embrace the technology and they will be fine. It's the Midland artists who aren't as passionate about it as the ones who are going to kind of fall by the wayside. And that's just the truth of it. But I was playing around with AI, and I stumbled onto Arcana Labs platform and jumped into it. And what was different about it than everything else that I was playing around with is I could do a lot of different things from within the platform. And mainly the ability to bring my own artwork and process it in different ways, and then take it and modify it and then bring it to life with motion. All those things just really struck me. And so just to get to where the start was here, I brought this artwork as it is as a PNG into Arcana Labs, into the Create suite, I think, uh, and gave it a prompt. A young girl with red hair and a ponytail. So I described what the illustration was, what she was doing, and just played around with some different models to get some different looks. And this is the first thing it spit out, which kind of stunned me. Um, just, it captured the pose, it captured the attitude, but just the visuals of that were really stunning. And then I ran some more variations and played around with different models. Some of them get really good, and then some of them get really weird. Like these really lean more into the original illustration that's based on the model. But really quickly, I was able to see that this was something. This was something that would maybe allow me to play around a little bit. And then the thing that really sold me was after I generated several different variations of that, I hopped into the motion suite and sent one to that. And then I just rendered a little 5-second animation. Just a little tiny bit of direction in the prompt, but seeing this come back was just stunning and kind of a revelation. And so I ran it a couple more times with different prompts. And just the degree of subtlety I was able to get on some things, and the degree of character that kind of came to life with this really quickly. So that was the start of this. This hooked me immediately, and this was all done from my couch on my iPad from within Arcana Studios. And so as this thing kind of got noticed uh, by Jonathan, and when the company whose platform you're using reaches out to let you know he digs the work you're doing, that's a big moment. I've been using Photoshop since version 2.5, and the only thing I've ever got from Adobe was surly tech support people. So after that initial video and getting some feedback, I got further into the idea of developing this as a full series. So I needed to develop my character a little bit more. Grace from the sketches is much younger than what I got from those couple of renders. So what I did then was I took that black and white render into Arcana and gave it some prompting and told it what color to make the hair, what color to make the costume, in general broad terms, and ran it through some different models. And I quite like these as like 2D illustrations. Those are kind of nice. And then I started to take some of those renders and modify them in a way that made it look more like a 3D model. And I start to get some better options. Kind of wide variety, but still a basic look of the character. I quite like this in the most. This had a fun expression, and the pose is good, and just the coloring on things worked well. I also did the same for the black and white image of her and her dog combined, her and Jonas. And I got some different results. Again, these 2D initial ones are okay. Then we get into 3D, and she gets a little weird, but the dog kind of comes into light a little bit better. So we're getting some good stuff and some weird stuff. And then I think it was this one I settled on. That's really exactly what I was hoping for. So that would be my basis for the dog model. And then both of those characters I sent individual versions of into motion. Like I ran a motion test on some of the 2D stuff. And those aren't too bad. If I were going to go 2D, I could make something work. But the characters seemed to work well in 3D and animated. I liked what I was getting from that. So it had a liveliness to it. Different poses looked good. This one, it added a second ponytail and changing the size, which would become a key part of the character design. The switch from a single ponytail to two ponytails. I know that seems silly, but it's a big part of her design now that really makes a difference. Then here are a couple with the dog and the girl rotating. Again, this is a good way to get a sense if your character works in motion on screen really quickly. You know, nothing's got to be rigged, nothing's got to be textured, nothing has to be sent off to the render farm. You can just crank on this stuff and see what works really quickly. So that's the start of the character design process I used for this. And then a lot of iteration later and a lot of updates and advancements in the modeling or in the models available. Then I get to this point where I've got a much more complete version of the character. Much more consistent, worked out. Again, these are some early models that I was using. Maybe Nano Banana or maybe Flux Context to get to these. But I get good poses and just some really nice emotive poses here. And then as models evolved and Nano Banana Pro came along, I was able to take that and clean that model up and get it tighter, and then go in and generate series of action poses, expressions that are really consistent across the character. So expression sheets are a matter of prompting, give me this many images of this many different emotions, and I can give it a range of emotions. Can remove her visor, different attitudes, different wardrobe. But these designs really turn out nice and they're consistent, right? And again, this is just one guy. I get the animation workflow pipeline. I know that you'd have your character designer who does character design, and then that gets finalized and goes off to 3D modeling, and then you've got your modeler, and then that goes off to 3D texturing, and then that goes off to layout, and then it goes off to animation, and on and on and on and on to get to this point. And that's not to dismiss any of those jobs, but I'm just one guy, and I have the skill set to do all those things, but I don't have the time, right? So this allows me to get to a point previously that would have taken so much time. And then talk about iteration and evolving things takes even more time. Same thing with the dog, with Jonas. I got one good view and then rendered out different views and different emotions. So all these are model sheets that I can use. And then I can start to combine the characters and set scale. And then you can drop them into some really cinematic shots, and you get a really good sense for how well this is going to play on screen. And is it cinematic? Will it be cinematic? I mean, if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. But these set up some really nice shots. I mean, these feel like something worth working on. And so that's where just working with them, Arcana, one app, I was able to get to this point and get all this stuff together and decide to move forward with this project. Another character I needed for the show is Grace's spaceship, known as Gary. This was the original design when I was working on it in school. And I went so far as I made a 3D model of it, textured it, and did a little flyby animation of it and some tests of it. But again, that kind of died once I got out of school. But I always liked the ship design, so I brought it back in to Arcana and brought it into the Modify suite. And here's the initial image without the window. And then I just started to again describe the ship in the prompt and try different settings and different models. And it started to give me a lot of good variation things. Some of these are really kind of dirty and grungy, but they keep the basic shape and form and colorations. And just more and more model switching. And again, within Arcana, you can try lots of different models to get lots of different results. So we get into things that look very kind of model kit like. And then this is taking that original image but really changing how much the model adheres to your source image. I would have never designed that, but I like that quite a bit. This, you can see the original design in that, but it's got so much variation it becomes like a newer model of that ship or something. And it also set this up when it rendered them to render them out as if they were part of a model shop, if they were as if they were being shot, you know, as three-dimensional models with studio lighting. So that helps. And then I went back to simplify it and make it a little more animated style and not quite so photorealistic. And then I get to just change the prompt a little bit, a little more cartoony, a little more Pixar style 3D, and it put it in a. Some of these put it inside a spaceship, which you get weird stuff like that. No explanation as to why. Sometimes it's whatever model you're using, but you can always extract it out of that. But you can test looks. Again, we're back to that for some reason. You can do different views, different angles, which this is useful. Now, every time you render it, a different set of angles, they're all going to be different. But you can kind of assemble them into something that you could send off to a model shop, for 3D modeling. You could get enough reference material where they've got multiple sides, multiple views to kind of play with and Frankenstein together into something new. This is an older version of that, but I had it clean it up, make it, solid white and cleaner, and did the same with some of those. So those were all initial versions of the ship. I believe I sent some of those to Motion. Again, this is a way to kind of get multiple views. Now, it did a weird thing where it took that fin that was down the middle and split that into two fins on either side. But this will give me alternate back views. So when you try to get a 360 on this, sometimes you get weird stuff. So you have to kind of play around quite a bit. Newer models do better at that. But you get a lot of unexpected shape and form that you otherwise might not have come up with. I would have never created that. There are things about it I like and things about it I can build on and pull from it. I don't have to use it exactly as is, but certainly for inspiration, you get a lot of stuff there. So that was the start of the ship, and then again, as new models came out, Nano Banana Pro Pro 2 actually has been a big help. This is again taking one of those older versions from Arcana and re-rendering it and tweaking it with Nano Banana Pro, and I'm able to get good front, side, back views that are consistent all the way across. So that, you can see, clearly evolved from that. So enough of my original design is there, enough of my original thought is there, but now I feel like we've made it better. So that's another good example of how you can, with your starting image, get to a really good place. I say quickly, there was months in between the release of Nano Banana Pro 2 and some of the previous models, so time is basically the time to do it is pretty quick. It's just waiting for new models to come out that do even better things. But Arcana is constantly updating too, so there's always new stuff showing up there, which is great. It's never going to stagnate. Something else I need environments for the show, just like anything. So this is one of those initial sketches that I developed for a particular environment in the show. Same thing, I brought it into Arcana, into the Modify suite, and gave it different prompts, and that was one of the first results I got from this. And that's wild. I love everything about that. It's bizarre, it's alien, keeps the basic shapes and forms. Now I played around with different settings and different prompts and different models and got several different looks. And then these stick more toward that illustrative look, which you can do that. If you want to maintain more of that look, you can do that. But then how you prompt and some of the different settings you have and different models available will give you lots of different results. And how detailed your starting art is too matters. So give this to your art department if you've got an art department. I am my art department, but pass this off to like a legit background artist and say, here, iterate, play, have some fun. There will be ideas you would never come up with. And again, there's like a degree to which you can push what happens in Arcana. And the more you push it, the more interesting stuff you get. But those all come from that original source image. Again, here's another image from that same style. Different looks. This one is based off of that. Again, just shape language, composition. Don't need a ton of detail, but if you get strong shape language, then you can get pretty good results. And again, how you describe the prompt. Lay it all out there visually in your prompt. That matters. Your ability to describe what you actually want. So you can just go on and on and on and get tons of options. Here's an example, takes you right through the whole process inside Arcana. This is just a really quick painterly sketch I did. I need a jungle environment, and I want these big giant mesas rising up from the ground, a little bit like Devil's Tower kind of thing. So this is my original sketch. I set tone, I set color, I set the basic composition, but then I took it into Arcana, into the Modify suite, and prompted make a photograph of a lush jungle scene with giant gray mesas rising out of the ground, encircled by mist. And that's the first thing it sent back. And so these are with the Context Pro model. You get some good stuff. These still feel very illustrative. Then I switched to a different model and got this and these. Again, if you look with the original source image, no, that's not it. Again, there's my original source, right? And then you can take these and iterate from these. And then what you can do, so this is the final version I settled on. What I did, I got to a certain point where I liked it but didn't have enough detail. So I took it into the Enhance suite. And was able to give it more detail in the trees and in the mountains. And you can check your slider and see how much more detail in the center here in the midground and on the mesas it's got. So then you can, you can give an image much more definition and detail. And then you can go into modify. And what's great is I could take this image and then specify, give me different shots, different angles, different locations based on that image. So I get these nice low shots and these detail shots. It all springs from my original image, but then it generates a lot of good options. And each of those I could pull out and use for something. Take them into Photoshop, pull them out, and start from there. It's a quick way to get together your design. Like this nice little close-up there. I didn't need that. I probably wouldn't have drawn that, but now it's nice to have. It's okay, that's what the vegetation looks like here. It added the rivers in. Then what I can also do is while I'm waiting for things to render, I can hop into Motion and take this image and just give it 5 seconds of animation. And generate my shot. What kind of shot is it to fly through, and I can have it, I can define audio if I want to, sound effects, music, or I can have it just be silent. But then from each of these, if I want this vantage point as the start of something else, let's say I like that, I can take that and save that frame and then go use it as the starting point for another image or another shot, whatever. And then once I've got all these different shots here done, I can continue to create within that world. So here, this is another new sketch. Again, the same world, but a really quick paint, where I just established these large gray and brown structures as these large mesas jutting up out of this jungle. And I just really try to define it with color. And then I tell Arcana to use X model and generate epic cinematic shot of massive rocky flat top spires jutting out of a dense jungle and so on. And I start to get this and this, and then I get to this and that, that. So here what I've done is I've taken that image, I've told it to use some of these different grid views that I created and create a new image based on all of those. So it starts to really define that world further. So I can create my style of the world, I can do multiple views and use those as references to expand upon. And all that stuff took, like, if it took 15 minutes, 5 of that was just waiting for stuff to generate. So that's the process I'm using to make this show, basically. I start with, as much as I can, I start with my own art. Some of it's going to be more defined than others. Some's going to be, fairly loose drawing, really loose sketches with primarily shape language. And some will be much more painterly detailed concept work. But I try to use as much as my original vision as I can get into this, I'm going to use. But if I can find ways to make things more efficient, get to the end result faster. As long as I'm kind of, sticking with what I want and my vision for this, then I'm good with that. I don't have a problem with it at all. But I think it's a tool that allows me to do something I would have never otherwise been able to do. I didn't have the time to do all this myself. If I'm creating drawings and paintings and then modeling and texturing and animating and compositing and rendering and everything else, I don't have the time to do all that, especially to this degree. And I certainly don't have the resources to hire everyone needed to do all those things at any kind of scale of the quality I'm after here. But now just with these tools, I can do this. Uh, and there's a lot of troubleshooting on the way. A lot of shots that I still can't get yet or haven't figured out how to get yet. The technology is still evolving. The video models are still evolving. I'm troubleshooting as I'm going. And as new models come out, I'm going back and redoing old scenes that didn't work quite as well. But that's an overview of how I'm working with this software to create my own show in conjunction with Arcana Studios. They've been great. They've been a great resource and a great partner for doing this. I couldn't be luckier. I thought I'd just go ahead and document the process of making this as much as I can. Maybe try to do a weekly update as every week I'm putting in the time and running up against things I got to fix or don't know how to do that I have to figure out how to do, or maybe helpful workflows or helpful tricks. So I'll try to keep, posts coming for anybody who stumbles upon this page and is interested in this workflow for maybe doing this for yourself or maybe making things more efficient wherever you're working. If you've got a team, you can make their life easier with this, keep them all happy and employed, but introduce them to some new powerful tools that will expand their own ability to be storytellers. It's fun stuff, man. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking around.